methods are, I guess the good news about them is that they're really easy and convenient to use, but you don't ever have to use them if you don't want to. In that you can rebuild a lot of this yourself on the fly if you really wanted to. But these exist because a lot of people use these, and it's just a really nice shorthand for a lot of the things that you're trying to do. Okay, so higher order array methods essentially are their functions, right? Their methods on the array class. So in the same way that we do array.push, you also do array dot, and then we'll go through the four that we're talking about today. Okay. Array.push takes in one argument from what we've seen so far, and that argument is essentially what the value of the latest element is going to be, right? We push something, it adds to the very end, and we tell it what value to add. In this case, what these array methods take in are a few things. The most important one of which is that it actually takes in a function, right? So if I was to ask you, hey, how do I want to do something to every element in the array, what's kind of your default answer? Like, let's say I want to add the number 5 to every element in a list of 10 numbers. How do I do that, Frida? I'm sorry?
You return and then add 5? Create the function, return the number, and add 5.
Okay, we're missing a lot of steps in the middle there, right? So I have a list of 10 things, right? Ashley, do you want to come and type? Yeah, great. Let's just do that, because then there's code is always kind of like the nicest way to remember. Okay, so let's say I have this function called add 5, right? It's going to take in an array, and then here I want to do console.log out add 5, and I want to feed it in the array of, let's say, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Good.
What do you want me to do now?
I'm sorry?
You want me to do something?
Type. Okay.
And then I'm just maybe? No?
Well, so what's add 5?
You said, what do you do if you want to add or do something to the function?
Okay, so
That's what I'm doing.
let me put it this way. So I have like an array, right? That's 1, 2, 3. Okay, and I want to print out what happens when I add 5 to each of the numbers in that array. Right. So that's why the listing is important, right? So essentially, is I want a function that takes in an array and gives me back. Well, for now, we'll say a new array.
I don't know.
Okay, just no. I know how to do it, but the question is like, who else feels comfortable coming up and doing this on the fly? Matt, you want to come up and do it? So same mandate, right? I need a function that takes in an array and gives me back a new array where I add number 5 to every one of those numbers.
Okay. Oh, did you say we're adding 5 to each one of the numbers in the array? Is that what's going on?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just making sure I'm
Sure.
listening to you. This is where I always get lost. So then the array.
I feel like this is kind of like the last thing we did, where like I don't exactly know how to get it added to each part of the array. So I do array.push.
Okay.
5 plus 5. Can I do that? So I'm not totally wrong.
Yeah, it definitely executes. Let's put a console.log ARR on line 9.
Okay.
Okay, so then now let's run it.
Okay. So
Um,
I'm not adding 5 to any of the numbers. is
Well, so the
issue.
problem, the biggest, so really quick, before you type any more,
Yeah. Sorry.
when you look at this, what seems to be the biggest glaring problem right now? Yeah,
Oh, I have the index.
I'm sorry? Not even there yet. Claire.
There's no argument.
That's true, but not even there yet. Pedro.
Function's not being called.
Right. We wrote this one in UAR and we never run it anywhere. So right now, like it's like lines 3 through 7 doesn't really exist, right? We
Okay.
created every AR to log it out.
So I need to go new.
So are you gonna run a function
No.
while you're inside the function?
No.
You can do that in the next class, but not now. Because that's what recursion is. And it's really painful, but like so you're still inside UAR.
Oh, I'm still inside. Sorry. So confusing. Okay. Should I be passing something in here? I feel like this is where I'm lost now. Hi, phone a friend. I've typed all I know.
Well, okay. Well, really, before you phone a friend,
Help me.
walk me through the logic on line 4 there.
On line 4?
Yep.
Okay. So var I, which is the index, equals 0, because I'm starting at index of 0.
Okay.
And then I was just about to ask you, like, I feel like I should be less than, like, the index should be less than 3 or 4, but I need to iterate through it. But I still feel like it should be 0.
All right. Do you want to pick a friend to
Oh,
Hi.
array.length.
I get here? Or
Am I right? Sorry. Damn it. I don't want an infinite loop. Alright, phoning a friend who wants to come up. I'm gonna leave that blank.
All right. Which friend do you want to phone?
Hmm.
Pick someone. All right.
Ooh,
Who
this
wants to
is
help
fun.
now?
Am I allowed to pick Pedro? He's so eager.
Yeah, sure.
Alright, Pedro, come show me.
Sure.
You want to come to type?
Actually,
Yeah, from now on, I'm not going to have you guys explain code anymore because I wanted you to know how painful it is to actually, like, sit here and write code. Not painful, I guess, but, like, I feel like when you are telling me what to write, like, I make a lot of assumptions on your behalf. Like, oh, you meant to say this, and type it out, but I realize, like, there's a lot of being lost in translation there, so I want you to actually physically type out the code.
I'm used to European keyboard.
Yeah, new keyboard's always weird, sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm. So what do I want to do?
You want to return an array where you add 5 to every number.
Okay. It's 5. And return array. The end.
Okay, cool. That seems to do it. We actually don't even need the. Yeah, we actually don't need the return because we don't use it anymore, right?
All right.
Yeah, because we're just kind of
I'm changing the array either way.
you're changing the array either way, and we're kind of using this like nice like pass-by reference, kind of like I guess almost hack around it. Yeah, cool. Okay, so this is what we want to do. We want to add 5 to every single array, right? First, is everyone comfortable with this? Even if you can't write it yourself, I put you on the spot. Are you comfortable conceptually with how this is working? Okay. Because essentially, what almost all the array prototype methods we're talking about in this class, what they help you do is they kind of make this for loop assumption for you. Okay. What it does is it actually just kind of iterates on your behalf. It'll say, all right, you're gonna give me a function. I'm gonna assume what you want to do is take every single element in your list and do this function on that thing. Okay, so that's like why array methods are people like to use them, but they're really convenient is because they basically save you the trouble of having to write that for loop. Okay, but they obviously also do some pretty cool higher level stuff too. Okay, the second one, because they loop through the entire array, you really shouldn't be breaking out of a for loop. There are ways to, but like if you feel like you have to break out of it, then you probably shouldn't be using one of the built-in array methods to start with. It does the callback function on every element in the array, and then for the ones that we talk about today, at least, they always return a new array. So because of that, they're actually fairly safe, and then they don't mutate the original array. Like what Pedro was doing was we were mutating the original array, so it could have been dangerous down the road if the code wasn't clear what was happening. For the ones we're talking about today, they always return a new array, which also means that we also need an equal sign in there, right? Because we want to capture what's being returned somewhere. Okay. The first one is a for each loop, and so let's say line whatever this last line here is kind of where the first line of code is actually being run, right? So fruits we've defined as an array of three strings, and so the way that we call an array prototype method, kind of like how we do arr.push, now we're just doing arr.forEach. Okay, so that tells you that for each is a reserved word in JavaScript, right? For arrays at least, right? It means don't use for each for anything else. It's built in and it does a certain thing. For each is a function, and we're invoking it here. And I know this because I see for each and I see the open and the close parentheses right after it, which means we're invoking it. We're running it right now. And what are we passing into for each here? A function, right? This function called log of value. It doesn't really exactly matter what it is, but we just know that we're passing in the log of value. Okay. And so the really interesting thing here is, and this is the part that I think people struggle with, is JavaScript's actually doing a lot for you behind the scenes because they assume that this is what you wanted to do because you're using this tool to start with, right? It's making assumptions on your behalf. So as the name of this function indicates, it takes in a value and it just logs it out to you, right? And if we were to run this takes in a function, right? But what do we not see here? Or rather, if I was to actually run this, okay, this code runs, it's syntactically correct, there's nothing wrong with it. But what is strange about how it's doing this that we didn't expect? It is acting like a for loop, right? Yeah. Okay. So here is console logging out every element in the list, right? What function lets us do that? Ellie? What function is logging out every item in this list? Log of values, right? So this means we're running log of value, right? Where are we running log of value? Where do we see log of value, open parentheses, close parentheses? We're not seeing anywhere, right? And so this is the first thing to realize, is that when you pass in a function to these array methods, they're going to run it for you. You're not going to see the open and close parentheses because they're going to assume that, well, I'm an array, you called me, you gave me a function, you clearly want me to run this. Otherwise, why are we doing this? Right? So that's the first kind of implicit assumption being made for a lot of these methods that you pass in a function, it's going to run it for you. Yeah, Kelly?
It's just the fruits would, the word fruits, the variable fruits would be in parentheses, right? So it's just like taking the fruits and putting it at the front. Is that what you mean?
Not following.
Log of value, if you were going to invoke it the way we already know how, it would just be log of value open parentheses fruits.
Well, so yes and no, right? This is running 3 times. It's logging each element.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying. So if we were to do what we just did there with what is this? With Pedro and Mao, what we would be doing would be something like this, right? We would say, for var I equals 0, I is less than fruits dot length, I plus plus. I go through. I go through here, and then I do something like log of value. I pass in fruits index of I, right? And so if I do that, let me see if I don't run this, I run that instead. There, I get the same answer, right? But I guess maybe this is a really good example of. In this case, we do this. In this other case, we do this, right? So it's shorter, it's convenient, and when you're really comfortable with JavaScript, like you want to do this because it looks cleaner. And if I was another programmer reading your code, I know what that does. This one, I can figure it out if I read into it enough. But it's just an extra layer of complexity that doesn't really need to be there. Okay. Okay. So line 10 and lines 12 to 14 are equivalent. Okay. So that's why this is shorter. What's the other thing here that we're not really seeing here that you would expect to see? And in fact, what am I doing in line 13 that is also not, besides invoking log of value, what else are you not seeing here? Alex?
A number of times that you would want to run it. That's because
Yeah, so that's in line 12, right? And that's like part of the implicit understanding, like if I call this on an array, I'm going to run on every single element in the array. So it does assume line 12. But in line 13, what's happening here? What's happening in line 13 that we're not seeing in line 10? Kevin?
We're not seeing a constant log,
We are.
but it's not saying.
Well, sorry, it's because log of value, in both cases where log of value is console logging it, so we're referencing this outer function. So the console log is there in both cases. Yeah. What are we seeing in line 13 that we're not seeing in line 10? That is true because we no longer have to iterate through it ourselves, right? What does log of value take in as an argument? It's not a true question. What does log of value take in as argument? Something. Value, right? Sorry, value. Cool? Right there, right? Line 2. I expect a value. Okay? I'm telling you I'm running log of string. Or sorry, I'm telling you I'm running log of value. Right? Here, you see exactly what I'm passing the log of value. What am I passing the log of value here? Well, so the short answer is we don't quite know. Right? Because I never see the open and close parentheses here, so I'm surprised it's even being invoked. And when it's being invoked, I actually don't know what's being fed into it. So this is another layer of assumption that JavaScript is making for you, okay? What JavaScript is assuming for you is, hey, when you call for each, not only am I running this function on your behalf for every single element in your array, I'm going to assume that your function takes in at least one argument. And that argument is going to be the element in the array that I'm running on your behalf. That is why when I run line 10 here, I get this, right? Because what JavaScript is doing underneath the hood is saying, hey, okay, I have fruits as an array, and you want to use for each, and you're giving me this function called log of value. What you're telling me, kind of, without really saying too much, is one, you want me to run it on every single element in the array, and two is you want me to feed every single element in the array as an argument into the function. Okay, so that's what for each does. Okay, and if you look on the documentation, basically, yeah, if you read the documentation, you actually see that a lot of these functions take a lot of arguments. In most cases, they're not being used. Okay, and so in JavaScript, it's one of the nice things that if a function is supposed to, let me back a little bit. A lot of these functions are configured so that they could take in a lot of different things. In most cases, if you don't use them, you're fine. In this case, we only expect one value, and the first value that the JavaScript is going to give us is always going to be the element itself. Okay. I know not everyone here has probably like kind of fully settled in yet on what this means and what this does, but just kind of know that for brevity at least that when you do an array method, JavaScript is making assumptions for you. For each, it's assuming that you want to run this on every single element in the array, and it's going to assume that when you run each function, that function is going to take in the element itself as the first argument. So that's where we're at here. Okay, and then whereas before we defined log a value as a function and we passed it in, here you can also just define a function inside of here, right? This is literally the same exact thing, except before we were saying, hey, var log a value equals function. Here we'll just paste the function straight into this within the for each. It's still, notice how despite all of these syntax and stuff, it's still, wait, oh, this is bad code. This is incorrect code. We should fix this. Yeah, it's missing a parenthesis, right? Because right now this will actually, we have an open parentheses here, but nothing closes it off. So for this purpose of demo, assume there's a closed parentheses here too, right?
So the functions within the first two parentheses after.
Yeah, the function is the first argument of for each.
Got it. You're just defining it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just change it. Yeah, no, this is my local copy. I can change this. Okay. Great, now it's correct. Okay, so for each expects a function as the first argument. In this case, we're rather than feeding it a variable that links to a function, we're just passing in the function directly. Same idea as before. Okay. And then so here's what I'm talking about. Here's where I was mentioning, like a lot of these functions are configured to pass in a lot of things, right? Not just the element itself. It also passes in the index of the element, right? Saying, hey, not only is the value here banana, this is the 0th index, this is the first index, this is the second index, okay? So there are use cases for all of those, and just know that it will actually try to pass all these things to every single time you run the function, okay? The problem was, the first time we ran this, we just cared about the first one. So we only positioned our function to take in the first argument, and we did, and we were happy, and there was no questions asked. If there was a case in which I needed a function that takes in the element and the index, for each does it for me, okay? And so what this also means is, here's another layer that for each, another layer of assumption that for each can keep in. For each is going to tell you that, hey, if you have a function that takes in 3 arguments and you give it to me, the first argument is always going to be the element. The second argument is always going to be the index. The third argument, I think, is always going to be the entire array itself. In any case, all that means is when you use these things, just be very, very careful of what assumptions JavaScript and the array methods are making on your behalf. Yes, Alex.
So sorry, that's the same. So for each, the first argument it assumes is the function that we want. And then if we were to put like a comma and have another element, it would be an index. Or it would assume that that's the index.
Yeah. Let's see, what does it have here? Okay, so this is like, so this syntax box in light blue here in the middle of the page. So this takes in, okay, yeah. So this is a little bit hard to read if you're not familiar with reading documentation. This is telling you that actually, in this case, for each takes in up to 2 possible arguments. Okay, the first argument is required, and we know this because the second one is not required and it's in brackets, which means it's optional. It's optional argument. Okay, the first argument has to be a function. The second argument is something that's a little bit more like nuanced. It's what this context is. We'll talk about it later. Not important. Okay. For everything you're doing for today, assume it takes in 1 argument. Okay. Now, within the function, the question now is, what do we feed into the function? And here, if you notice, this is the same idea, right? It's feeding at least the current value, right? And then optionally, it will feed the index. And then optionally, it will also feed the entire array. right? And it's always going to do it in this order. Okay, so if you are building a function that you want to pass in for each, and it takes in 3 arguments, you better make sure that those 3 arguments are these 3 arguments, because that's the assumption for each makes on your behalf. So if they're not the right arguments or they're in the wrong order, then you change your function before you pass it into JavaScript.
So it would be like if I were to plug in what we just had, so it would be for each function log a value and then fruits.
Sure. So let's just call this element. Let's call this index, and let's call this ARR. Cool. So let's just console log out everything. And then I'll log out this, and I'll just put in a string of asterisks to make sure that I'm like go past it. This is ARR. That's mildly annoying. Okay. So at every single function, that's what's being passed. That's the assumption JavaScript is making for you. I'm going to give you the element. I'm going to give you the index. I'm going to give you the whole array. And those are the things that you have access to in this function. You know, Kelly? You don't agree? You don't like it? So, I mean, when you look at this line, right, like, I guess it's running this function for every single element in the array. And now the question becomes, what do we feed into the function, right? If I could go back to the example I had earlier, I might be a little bit, I might just rewrite it, it might be easier. So for var I equals 0, I is less than, fruits dot length, I plus plus. And then here, what I want to run, I want to run log a value, fruits index of I. Cool. Right? This makes sense, right? If we don't run this, we run this. So same idea, right? The only thing here is, so what I'm saying is, so JavaScript makes this structure. I'm gonna run on every single element, and what JavaScript's also doing, or sorry, what for each, is also doing is it's gonna run log a value, and it's gonna run it with the first argument is gonna be fruits index I, the element. The second argument is gonna be I. Always. Whether or not you can't change this. If you use for each, you're gonna assume that this is something you want. And then the third element is gonna be fruits. And so if we run it that way, we get the same result as before, right? All I'm saying is it's gonna pass in these 3 arguments to you. If you don't need it, don't if you don't need it, it's fine. Like before, we only had one parameter in here, right? And so that was something I was like, okay, we only need the first argument, and Java's like, okay, cool. But I'm still giving you these 3. I'm just letting you know which 3 it usually takes in. Okay. Oof. Okay, so once again, not a great thing that's like, oh, very easy to explain and understand right away. But I guess at a high level, are there any kind of burning questions that people have around for each? Yeah, Claire?
I just have a question in general for methods. Like, if, say, you want the element and like the array to be returned, but you don't care about the index number, can you like skip? No.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So because they're always going to give it to you in this way.
Yeah.
What you're going to do is you're just not going to use index. But you still need to keep all 3 parameters up there.
Oh, you just don't give it anything to put.
Yeah, you just don't use it in your actual body of the code. But because
You still have to have it between the.
you still need to have it as a parameter because JavaScript is dumb in that way. Like there are other languages that do it kind of more elegantly, but for JavaScript, at least in this context, it's dumb in that it's just going to always make the first argument is going to be this,
Right.
second argument is this. So if you will only want the third argument, you still need to create space for the first 2.
But you don't have to do anything.
You're not doing anything with it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Can I select out what?
That page where it just shows like this constant one.
Sure. I'll do it. I might just post it in the channel as a code snippet because I know I'm going to keep changing this into. So I'll just write this as for each, and then
Can you watch the previous one as well?
the previous one.
The one that Pedro was working
I'm sorry, what?
on. The one that Pedro was working on.
The one that Pedro was working on. I think.
Didn't?
Well, the one that Pedro was working on actually. The one that Pedro was working on essentially was something like this, right? I think except he was just returning the array plus or minus 5, plus or equal 5. So he would have been doing something like console.log fruits index of I plus or equal 5. Like I guess it was still a very simple for loop. There wasn't anything like abnormal about it. Okay, so that's the for each loop. Okay, cool. And then, oh yeah, obviously, as you kind of have already read from this page, for each is going to return undefined. And so if you pass in a function that returns undefined to for each doesn't really care. Like it just ignores whatever you return. And so in that case, what is a good so the use case, okay, so I'm trying to think how to best phrase this. Because for each doesn't really mutate the original array, or at least you really shouldn't be using it to mutate the original array, and because for each doesn't return a new array, for each in general is only used if you want to almost run another function with this array as the inputs, right? So let's say like for log of value as an example, right? Like let's say you wanted to like, let's say log of value was really important and you wanted log of value to do things. For each is a really good way to almost feed in the array of inputs as inputs for log of value. I'm sure you'll come across a few other use cases for it, but just know that for each doesn't return anything and it doesn't care what you return. So its use cases in that regard are actually fairly limited. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to some of the other ones I actually think are a bit more commonly used. .map. .map I love. It's one of my favorite ones. And the reason why is because very often, kind of like what Pedro did earlier, it's like, well, I have 20 things in the array. I want to do something to all 20 things, and I want to create a new array, right? And normally we can do it with the for loop, but map just makes it a little bit easier, right? So right away, let's jump to this middle line here, right? var new use. Oh look, we now have an equal sign, right? And so and that equal sign is so critically important because, as I just mentioned, map returns a new array. So if we don't capture that value anywhere, it disappears completely, right? So that's why whenever you see a map, you will almost always see an equal sign next to it because that equal sign tells us that, hey, let's take this new array that we just created and let's actually store it somewhere. Okay, so you will almost always see an equal sign whenever you see map. And the new array is going to be as long as the old one was, which makes sense because what we're doing is we're going through every single element in the array. We're doing something. We're going to return a value, and then we're going to push that onto the new array. And so because if the array has 20 things, we're doing this 20 times. The new array, by definition, has to have 20 values, or as long as the old one is. So the really quick, simple way. So I'll also do a kind of like a before and after comparison here. Of what it looks like. So let's just say so let's just say that let's go. I guess Andy, let's go back to Pedro's old example, right? let's say I have this function called add5, right? Add5, and literally all it does is it takes in a value, and then it returns value plus 5, right? Very straightforward here, nothing special. And now instead of having a bunch of strings, let's just make this, 2, 4, 6. Okay. Everyone good so far here? Lines 1 through 5. Okay, cool. So the way to do this now is if I have a function called like create array the old way, that takes in a array. It's only slightly annoying. And I go through everything in the array.length. This now changes to add5. And normally I would have someone else come out and type this, but we're running a bit low on time, so I'm just gonna do this really fast. Return new AR. Okay, cool. So if I now console.log out, create new array the old way, create array the old way, pass in nums, I get what happened here. Oh, I forgot to, I'm dumb. Forgot to do AR index pass in something to it. Alright, great. Now we're good. Okay, great. So, I coded kind of in a row, but this should, at this point, hopefully be very, very familiar for all of you, right? I have this function, I'm creating a new array, and I'm returning a new array. And so inside each iteration of the for loop, all I'm doing is figuring out what the new value for the array is, and then I push it in as a new value. Okay? I push it into the new array, and I return all of it, right? And I get 7, 9, 11. So this is the old way of doing it, and this is, once again, perfectly valid, still works in JavaScript. If I was to do this in kind of like the new world, let me just get rid of some spaces. I'll probably do it in one line. The new way to do this then would be to do something like new array. It would do nums.map, and I can just pass in add5, and that would also do the same thing, right? So map is, once again, clearly clearly go from this, right, lines 7 through 17 to one line only. It's really simple, but it's clearly also making a lot of assumptions for us, right? So let's break down what those assumptions are. The first assumption is, hey, you're calling it on a list. I imagine you want me to use this function add5 on every single element in your list, okay? Secondly, your function is going to have to take in a bunch of arguments. What arguments are they? Well, the first argument is going to be the element. I'm going to also assume that on your behalf. You will see map, just like for each, also passes in index and the entire array as well, I believe, right? So once again, so all the assumptions we saw from the previous ones were valid, right? What's new about map that for each doesn't care what you return; it just throws it out, right? Map cares because it's going to assume that whatever you return from the function you give it, that's going to be the new value that's going to be added to the array at that index, right? So the way map think about it is, okay, great. I have an array of 10 things, right? For the first thing, I'm going to run this function, and in the first index of my new array, it's going to be whatever this function returns. And you do that for every single element. So to kind of belabor the point here, map returns a new array. It doesn't change the old array. And the new array is going to be as long as the old array was, and every single value in the new array is going to be generated by whatever function you give it. Cool. Whoops, sorry. Yeah, cool. Any questions? if you understood for each, this should be somewhat almost more intuitive, I feel like, right? Because normally, like, when you create a new array, this is kind of what you're thinking of. Like, I want to obviously duplicate everything here. Any burning high-level questions here before I move on to the next? Yeah, Brian?
So dot map, it doesn't change the original array?
Dot map does not change the original array. Dot map always return a new array, which means if you don't have an equal sign next to it, you probably shouldn't be running it, right? Because the value is going to be thrown away somewhere. So this one, I don't want to go through it too much. It's a lot of code, but it does the same exact thing. All this does is it's saying, hey, let's capitalize everyone's name. Great. Take someone's name, uppercase it, return a new string, and you have to return a new string, right? Because strings are not mutable, and that new string will become the new name in the new array. So when we run that, we get Sadie, Layla, and Pusheen. And then yeah, I guess the edge case is, hey, what if you just, had a mental blunder and you forgot to return something? What happens then? What if your function doesn't return anything? Shatavia, what happens? Not exactly. Yeah, Mallory?
Wouldn't the array just stay the same?
Not exactly.
Return, like, everything's still lowercase
Oh, sorry. Sorry, there's two levels of returning, right? The first return is whatever this function returns. The second thing is what .map returns, right? So the question is, what if your function doesn't return anything? Rocco, any guesses? Kevin? Sorry?
I'm not sure, but if the function doesn't return it, it will be undefined.
Okay. Keep going.
Trying to slice them.
Trying to what?
Then you'd be trying to slice them without
Oh no, the slice is just for the string. This is like what we're saying is, hey, lines like these two lines run perfectly fine, right? We just don't return anything in this function. So what do you think happens then? What does map return?
Alright.
A new array, yes. So let's combine the two things that we've already agreed upon. A function that doesn't return anything returns what? And then what does .map return? So what does that tell us?
Array of undefined.
You're going to get an array that's as long as your other array was, but every single value is going to be undefined. Okay? At least I hope that's what the answer is. Yeah, it is. Cool. So if you ever see this, it's pretty clear where you went wrong, right? Like, so once again, they make a lot of assumptions for you, and they're basically leaving it in your hands that you know what those assumptions are, is the short of it. Cool. And then if you return a static value, I mean, this one should be even easier, right? What if you return the same thing over and over again? You just get an array back with the same thing 20 times or however long your old array was. Great. That's .map. .filter. Okay. .filter. Very similar to .map. Okay. Well, similar in some ways, not similar in others. Okay. So let's. I will share the way I kind of did this for .map for you on the Slack channel as well, and then I'll just write kind of like the old-fashioned way of doing .filter, and then I'll also do the new way of doing .filter. So .map, it's this thing here. Okay, .filter. Let's say I have an array of numbers still, and I think the one they gave us is like, hey, can we pick out all the evens or get rid of all the evens or something, right? Whatever, doesn't matter. Var num, okay? And then we have a function that says, is even. It takes in a value, and how do I figure out if a number is even or not? Okay, so who wants to tell me what to type? And the crowd goes quiet.
Value. If value modulo 2 equals 0.
Okay.
Return
If
value.
value modulo 2 equals triple equals 0, what?
Return value.
Return value. Yeah. So I guess like kind of implicit. So if you think about a filter, right? Like you normally when you filter something, I guess especially in a programming sense, when you do a filter, you're basically saying is, hey, I'm either going to keep you or I'm going to discard you, right? There's only kind of two possible values for a filter, okay? And so because of that, the other kind of implied assumption when you use filters is, hey, whatever functions you use, it's going to return a boolean. And in fact, that filter actually does the same thing that an if loop does, where it will take whatever you give it, it will try to make it into a boolean, even if it's not, right? Because it's going to think, well, you're clearly filtering it, so you either want to keep it or you don't, right? There's not like 5 different options here. And so in that way, filter, when you think of filters, you should almost always think of things in terms of booleans, because that's how filters think too, right? Everything comes down to a boolean. And so in this case, if I want to figure out, hey, is this number even, right? Well, if it's even, then it means that the value that this had to be true, but then I can just return this directly, right?
And then one step further.
Yep.
Yeah, you can probably just get rid of the triple equals 0.
No, but that would give me the opposite of what I want.
Okay, so then fine, you put the bang in the parentheses.
Yep, that also works too. Oh. Okay, so it's just bang, and then we need the quotes here to make sure that we're. So, anywho, just take it for granted that this is going to give us. I'm going to give this a number, and it's going to give me back a true or false of whether or not this number is even. Okay, let's just take that as gospel for now, because that's not the focus here for this problem. Okay. So now, if we're going to say, hey, filter array the old way. Oh. Filter array the old way. We still take an ARR, we still have a new array, we still go through every single element in this array. And now here what we have is an if loop, right? We're saying is if is even, and we're going to push in array index of I. If that is true, we're going to do new array dot push. I'm sorry? You're right. This one should be parentheses. The one inside is the bracket. Yep. Cool. So if I comment this out, I do this. Haha. Filter array the old way. Cool. So, I mean, logically speaking, right, we're doing this for loop, nothing very special here. We're creating a new array. We're going through every single element array. We're saying, hey, if this passes condition, if it's true, let's add it to the new array, okay? So this also tells us a few things, right? One is the new array, in the best case scenario, so to speak, it will be as long as the old array, but it will never be longer than the old array, right? Because we're going through every single element for how to keep it or not. So in the best case scenario, we keep everything, and it's as long as the old array. Secondly, it's a filter. So I give you a value, you tell me that I want to keep it around, right? That also means we can't change this value. We can't say, oh, let's keep this number, but let's add 5 to it. Because that's not how filter works, right? Filter is saying, look, you just tell me if I want to keep it or not, right? If you want to do some transformations or change it, use something else. I just care about understanding, hey, this number as is, current state, do I want to keep it or not? If I do want to keep it, then yes. If I don't want to keep it, then I'll toss it out. But anywho, so then we get to the very end here, push a new array, we return it. Everyone see how we got to this, right? This is all just very, very vanilla JavaScript for loop, okay? The way to do this with .filter, as you can imagine, is literally the same exact thing that we were doing earlier, except now instead of doing add5, we're doing is even, and then here we're doing a .filter, and boom, we get the same exact answer, okay? Obviously, more shorter, those assumptions, right? We still need to filter on every single element in the array. Okay, you can't exclude half the array from being filtered. You have to do it all or nothing. Okay. Does not change the original array, which is super nice, right? You keep everything in the original array, and it gives you a new array of the things that you decide you want to keep. It takes a function, and that function is going to just like I think that this one also takes an element index and the entire array. And the last thing is it expects back a boolean. And if you don't give it a boolean, it will do its best to make it into a boolean. And you probably don't want that, realistically speaking. But but just know that filter lives only in boolean, right? All it's doing is saying, hey, let me look at everything on this list. And do I keep it, yes or no, in its current state? I can't change it. And so if you were to go back to this example here, the way that they're doing this, we basically filter out. I actually don't know what this is. Oh yeah, this is. Oh yeah, the first one is how long the resulting list is, even nums. And remember, we're returning a new array, so it's super important that we capture the output in a new variable. In this case, even nums. Even nums has one thing, and it's number 10. What if the callback function always returns true? We return back a copy of the original array, right? Is that a pass by reference or pass by value? Is the new array tied to the old array, or is it the same exact array?
Pass by value.
Copy.
Is it a copy or is it the same array? It's a copy, right? Because notice how in the code that I had written, at least, we basically created a new array from scratch. Yeah.
Deep or shallow?
Good question. I believe it's deep. I can't imagine a world in which it's shallow would be super dangerous. I'm gonna go and assume that it's deep, but I can always just Google it and check. So the question is, does filter filter. Let's see if it says in here.
Doesn't say deep or shallow in there.
Doesn't say deep or shallow in here. All right. Well, let's just use some of our JavaScript filter deep copy. Let's see if that does it. Interesting. Okay. Well, the other way we can also figure this out is we can just try write it ourselves, right? And see right away what it is. So if I'm wrong, then I'm really sorry. I actually assumed it'd be deep copy because just for safety reasons. So this is dot filter. I'm gonna paste this here, and let's just test out to see if dot filter is shallow or deep. Okay. So I'm gonna stop running this, but I'm gonna keep this in its place. Okay. And I'm gonna say okay. So I'll say var new nums is equal to this, and in my original array, rather than having this be oh yeah, let's just make this really useless, and I'll be a pass through, and this one will be a value of 1, 2. Okay. So now if I do this, if I console log out, this should give me the original array still. Everything's good. Cool. And then here, what I'll probably do is I'll console log out new nums. New nums, I'll console log that down here. Still so good. And here is where I want to do this again, but in the interim, what I want to do is I want to say for the O nums, index 0, index 0, no, not that, index 0, is equal to 1,000. So let's see if it's deep copy or shallow copy. Oh, I was wrong. It's a shallow copy. That's bad. Oh well, but it's a shallow copy then, I guess. Sorry, Yin. It's a shallow copy, which is, I'm not a fan of that, I have to say. But anywho, okay, cool.
It's like, why are you creating a copy in that scenario if you could just go back and edit it fairly easily?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's what happened? Oh, okay. Anywho, okay. So that's that filter. The callback always returns false. You get an empty array back. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, last one is dot reduce. This one, I think, typically speaking, gives folks the most problems because dot reduce is a super easy way to add a bunch of things together, but the argument structure looks unlike the other ones. So let's do this in our kind of like old/new way, right? By the way, is this helping, like, to write it the old way and the new way so you guys can see what it is? Okay, good. Otherwise, I'll stop doing it. Okay, so I have this 5, 4, 1, 6, that's 16. Okay, and then I have a function which is just, I'll call it add nums. And add nums takes in two numbers, a comma b. And it returns a plus b. Everyone with me so far? Cool. And so if I was to do this kind of the old-fashioned way, I'll call it reduce array the old way. I'll delete all of this because this is no longer necessary. I'll call this one reduce array the old way. And I take in an array, right? And so the goal here is to say, all right, I want to add up every number in the array, right? So in the old way, I'll have this called new sum. It's going to equal what? I want to add up every single number in the array and see what the total is. So what should I start new sum as? It is 0, right? I start at 0, I keep adding numbers into it, and eventually I return it. I go through every element in the array, and then I do something called add num, okay? And what do I feed into add num here? Actually, I don't even need this if statement anymore. There's no because I'm back in the land of, hey, I do everything to every element equally. Oh, not that. Okay. What do I do here if I want to add up every number in the array? Like what someone type for, or someone like verbally type for me what I should be writing in line 11. I'm sorry? New sum plus or equals array of index I. That cool. All right, that seems to do the trick, right? I have a number, and I'm just adding the new number plus the old number, okay? What if I want to incorporate my add nums function here? How would it look? So I'm going to comment this out. This works. Works, yay. But if I just wanted to kind of, like, be fancy, and what do I want to use add nums function? How would I do it? Lewis?
You would call add nums.
Type for me.
So on line 12,
yep.
Add nums, open parentheses.
Okay.
And then the two that you want to iterate through. The first one is going to be new sum.
New sum.
And the second one is going to end up being array at I.
Okay.
So each time you go through, that gets updated and added to the new sum.
Cool. All right, let's try it.
You're returning new sum.
But it should return new sum
What is it? Index that returns it?
No, line 14, the return's correct. Don't focus too much on that. That's correct. What is new sum? What data type is it? It's a number. Is that primitive or non-primitive? Is that passed by value or passed by reference?
value.
Okay, so in add nums, what am I returning?
A number and an array.
What data type am I returning in line 4 in add nums?
A number.
Oh, it could.
What data type am I returning in the function called add nums?
Non-primitive.
I mean, if I were trying to fix this, I would console log type of both new sum and array I.
Sure.
Right after.
Let's do it. Console log out. You said new sum, right?
Type of.
Oh, type of. Sorry. So the type of new sum, true, and then I would be type of new sum, and then I would do the same thing for array index of I. So type this out. Cool. So everything's a number, at least based on all the inputs. So what does line 4 return? Yeah.
Well, right now we're not storing anything.
What do you mean?
Like add sum is doing something, but we're not storing that the result of A plus B.
Oh.
So what's the solution?
And we're never changing the value of new sum, which should be the new total. So new sum should be equal to add. The only he's giving his name.
Well, if you set new sum, if on line 14, new sum equals add nums.
What happened? I didn't hear him.
He said he's an infinite loop.
I'm just gonna delete these 3 lines really quick
Yeah,
just to make
let's
sure.
go with Lewis was just saying. New sum equals add nums.
On line 11.
Okay, so what am I doing now?
Before add nums, new
Okay.
sum equals that.
New sum equals this.
It should, at some point, it should have changed to something other than 0 though, so I don't think it's gonna work. That makes no sense.
Cool. All right.
Well, so you're storing.
Oh, I see. At some point, the output of it has to go back to new sum. Otherwise, you're just doing it for the sake of spinning your wheels and then returning what it was before the for loop.
But doesn't, if new sum keeps changing when it, it keeps changing when you pass it through values.
It's not plus equals. You're not like going above and beyond. You're just resetting new sum each time.
So like if we just go through each iteration, like the first time new sum is 0, and we're summing 0 plus 5, and then add nums is returning 5. The new sum is now 5. Right?
Oh yeah. Okay. And then you add 4.
So if we had console logged, my next step after the 2 initial console logs would have been to console log what add nums was representing. It would have been 5, and then it would have been like, oh, okay, great, you just didn't do anything with that 5. You got it. That's how I would try to debug it.
I mean, look, like at the end of the day, like this is something that like I'm sure if you write more code, you get more familiar. Like on line 4 there, like I'm returning a number. Well, I better be storing a number somewhere because there's 0 possibility that could be referenced somewhere by anyone else, right? I'm storing a copy of a number, or rather, I'm returning a copy of the number, and the person who I give it back to is not using it right away, then it's going to disappear forever, right? If it was an object or an array, it'd be different because I would think, well, maybe someone else is also modifying this object, modifying this array, and like maybe that's kind of where they were going with it. But here I'm just like, okay, I'm returning a number, and if there's no equal sign assigned to anything that's returning a copy of itself, just like map, just like filter, just like all these things, if you don't assign, if there's no equal sign, then why are you running that function? There really should be no reason why you're running a function without ever capturing a value if it's returning something. Okay, cool. So this is kind of like the old-fashioned, a bit of a clunky, but gets the job done for reduce, right? How does reduce work again? I think the way reduce is going to work here is if I just do nums dot reduce. Everyone's pretty happy here. It makes sense. And I feed in add nums, and also feed in something called a 0. Let's see if this also does it. Cool, that does it too. All right, so line 18 now is kind of like our smart, like new, like really shorthand way of, or line 17 is our short new hand way of doing everything we're doing between lines, essentially 7 through 15. Okay. This is actually add nums. Literally is what dot reduce assumes. Like your, well, okay. So the reason why dot reduce is special is because dot reduce typically is meant to kind of sum things, right? Usually it's numbers, but we can also do things like creating a new array, right? Or kind of other things are iterative. This second, so everything we've done so far has except only one argument, right? Which is the callback function that we want to execute in every single element. Reduce also executes in every single element, but it takes in a second argument. And the second argument essentially is, where do you want to start? Okay. And so in the callback, whereas every other callback that we've seen so far, for the most part, we've only used the first element, right? Or the first argument, which is the element itself. Here, this actually takes in two arguments. And the two arguments are A and B, right? Let me make sure I'm telling this in the right order, because order is super critical for reduce. JavaScript reduce. Let me just pull up the documentation, we just have it here as a reference, okay? I think the first one is the sum. Accumulator, yeah, great. Okay. In the callback, this also takes a variety of arguments, but the first two are the ones that are super critical to us. The first argument is, what is my sum thus far? And the second argument is, what is a current element? So basically, a current element got bumped from being the first argument in all the other ones that we've seen, and now it's the second argument. The first argument is now, hey, what's the total so far? And so here, in this case, if I was to run this through reduce, the way that JavaScript thinks about this is, okay, David, you give me a list of numbers, you want to run reduce, you have this add nums function, and you have you want to start at 0. In the first iteration, what it's going to do is it's saying, okay, great, let me pass in your current value and your new element into your callback function, right? So in the first iteration, the callback value is going to be, in the first iteration, what's my value so far? My cumulative total so far? 0. And what's my first element? 5. And I'm telling it, hey, return 0 plus 5, which is 5, right? Now, the assumption that reduce makes at this point is saying, whatever you return to me at that point, that'll be your total for the next time I run this function. So when I run this function again, right? So that was 5, right? Now moving 4, I'm running add nums again. What's my total so far now for add nums? And what's my new element? 4. So what's my total? 9. So then what does that 9 become? What?
Your new total.
Oh, right. The 9 becomes the new total that I feed into it when I move on to the next element in the array, which is a 1, right? And so the really easy way for us to prove this, right? I should have just done this actually from the beginning. If we just console.log out A, or A, and then I do the same thing for B. It's a little bit messy, but if you just take enough time to look through it, like that's kind of what I started at 0, my new element is 5, so that feeds my next total, which is 5, right? My next total is 5, I'm feeding it 4, my next total is 9, okay? My current total is 9, my new element is 1, my next total is 10. Right, my next element is 6, I add them up, and I'm done. This is just a duplicate because I ran it twice down there, but you get the idea, right? And so this is kind of what so these are the assumptions that reduce makes for you, right? It lets you tell it where to start. So let's say let's say those are like my my income for the next like 5 days or 4 days, right? And let's say I already have $100 in the bank. I want to know what my total is going to be, 5 days from now, right? I would probably start at 100 instead of 0. Okay? So that's why JavaScript lets you do that. It's like, hey, I know you don't always want to start at 0. Let's just kind of tell me where to start. Okay? The assumption that reduce makes. Once again, it will run across every single element in your array, and there's no way around that. It's going to assume that the return of your function that you feed it is going to be the new total for the next one, right? And the crazy thing there is you can return anything, and reduce won't care. It's just going to blindly take that and say, great, that's your total for the next one, right? So if I change like, if I rather than returning a plus b, I say, hey, let's return 1,000. Literally, JavaScript will say, great, your new total is just 1,000. Let's do the next one. Oh, great, your new total is 1,000. Do the next one, right? Like it gives you the power to determine what the total for the next run is. Yeah, and it gives you back a new value. It also may not always give you back a new number. And so here's the example I'll give here, right? What if my starting off point was an array, and I'm returning, let's say I do a dot push b, and then I return a. I'm sorry. This now, when I run this, oh shoot, what did I do?
4. Dot push.
A dot push. Oh, you're absolutely right. Thank you. Those are mistyped. A dot push, not a function. Why is a dot push not a? Oh, it's because I'm doing it the old way. The old way is gonna break. Okay. So here, what's my starting off point?
Right.
Here, okay. So when I go to 5, what happens on line 4 there?
You're pushing.
I add 5 to the array, right? So now I have an array with what in it? One element is 5, right? And then what am I telling reduce in line 5 there?
To return.
Right. I'm telling reduce that, hey, when you run this again for the next element, your starting off point is going to be an array with 5 in it. One element, 5. Okay? So now when we move on to 4, what's my starting off point?
Array.
An array with 5 in it. What is my new element? 4. So then what's line 4 doing? That's going to give me an array now with 5 and 4. And on line 5, I'm telling it, hey, by the way, this array with 5 and 4, this will be my new starting off point for the next one. So this is just to give you a sense that reduce is primarily used for summation purposes, but not always, right? It's really good for accumulating data over time as you go through an array. If you remember map and filter and for each, what they're really good for is kind of acting on an element at that moment. Like it kind of, in a certain way, assumes that every element is independent of one another, right? I look at the first element, I'm really only looking at the first element, and so on and so forth. Here, the really good thing is I can actually keep track of things as I go through an array. So if I'm trying to add up a bunch of numbers, trying to build up a bunch of things, like this reduce is super good for keeping track of something as you're going through an entire list. Okay. Any high-level questions so far? Okay. I mean, the rest of this should be pretty straightforward. Yeah. So this is telling you that in the function that we feed it now, the first element is going to be the total so far, and the second element is now the current element, so to speak. Oh, sorry, the second argument is now the current element. And the first argument is going to be the total so far, which usually is kind of what's returned from the previous cycle. Unless, of course, you're on your first run in which the total is whatever you tell it the total is at the very beginning. We define the function. Yeah. This is you can read this on your own. This is a rehash of kind of what we just talked about in a lot more depth. I want to say, yeah. I want to say that the default for dot reduce is actually we can just really easily figure that out, can't we? If I don't put anything here,
I think it's 0.
is 0.
I think so.
It's not 5. Why is it 5?
You console log before you do anything.
Oh, shoot. Okay. All right. Fun implementation fact. Sorry, I just remember this. I should have mentioned this to you guys earlier. Fun fact. This is for you to know. Don't worry too much about it when you use it. If you don't give it a initial value, it'll assume that your first value is your initial value, and it'll actually start iterating on the second element. Okay? Yeah. That's why in this case the initial value, well, it's deleted, but the initial value is 5. Because like, oh, you didn't tell me an initial start value, so I'm just going to go on a limb here and assume that you wanted your first element to be your starting value. And that's also the reason why you very, very rarely see a dot reduce without specifying where the starter is. Because you don't want JavaScript to do it for you, and if another human is reading your code, you definitely don't want them to try to figure out what the array is. So you almost rarely see that without having the first element in there, but that's the assumption that JavaScript or dot reduce really makes for you. If you don't give it a starting point, it will think your first element is your starting point, and we'll move on to the next one. And I guess that would also be true if, for example, we had something like this, right? That then works. Anywho, cool. So that's dot reduce, and then the last slide here is just more of like a application, I guess, of everything that we've done. Right? Is that like, hey, if you remember, like everything we've done here, dot reduce, or I guess not reduce, but dot filter, dot map, dot for each. Actually, not for each. Dot filter and dot map for the most part, right? They all return what? A new array. So guess what that new array can also do? Yeah, they can use dot map, dot filter, dot reduce, dot whatever, right? And so in this case, the idea is like, hey, if I have a bunch of numbers, I can dot filter first, and then I can create a new array where I multiply everything by 10. Right? And really, as long as everything here is returning a new array, I can just dot nonstop, because in each case I'm returning a new array, and every array has access by default to all these methods we talked about. Alex?
Is that the syntax you use? That it's like nums dot filter is odd and then on a new line dot map.
Oh, sorry. You can do it on the same line. The new line is just I think that there might be an image here. No image. Okay. Well, still. Don't about like if anything like yeah, the spacing actually might like if there's a line escape here, it will actually treat as 2 new lines. In some cases, what also happens is like your viewer just kind of indents it for you, so it might look like it's on 2 lines, but in JavaScript's eyes, when it reads through it sees it as on 1 line. But yeah, it's just all on 1 line is totally fine. Dot this, right? This is almost kind of like when we chain together like the way we access a nested array that we chain together the indexes, that as long as the previous element gives you something that you can use the next thing for, go for it, right? So as long as this is giving me an array, dot map should be pretty fine. If I do a dot reduce here and it gives back a number to try to dot map, JavaScript's gonna scream at me and say, hey, look, I can't do a dot map on a number. So chain together is pretty powerful. And obviously, like I said, like a caveat at the very beginning of this class, everything I'm telling you here is it's a shorter way to do some very common things, including chaining. So if you don't feel comfortable or you don't want to use it, feel free to not use it. Okay, cool. So that was that lecture, which took probably, I guess between that and the review, it definitely took a lot longer than I wanted to, but I'll probably select out groups and we can do maybe like 45 to 50 minutes of the workshop, and I'll walk through the first 2 solutions with you all together. We should also be getting pizza here in the next like half hour or so we can hang out, like eat and whatever. The next 2 lectures are both on recursion. So